Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. It's Jennifer Wilson with Convergence Coaching, and I'm here with my good friend, Amy Vetter. Hey, Amy.
Hello.
And we're here for Leadership Lunch Chat, which we have been doing for a long time, 4 or 5 years. We're supposed to be trying to figure that out, but we keep forgetting to stop and set the exact start date, where we process issues facing our profession or ideas or frameworks or whatever it may be that can help us be better leaders in our day-to-day work in any of the entities that you may represent or that we may represent. Just, how can we navigate current events and common issues to try to be the best leaders we can be. And so today, Amy and I thought that we would talk about the concept, maybe kind of evaluate a question that I sometimes find myself asking when I'm going in and meeting with leadership teams. And it's both internal within a leadership team, but it's also external with the way that that team interfaces with others, with peers, with competitors, with clients. And so what I want to do is I want to frame this, maybe, I don't know if it'll work or not, we'll find out, but frame it in, are we collaborating, and is it genuine collaboration? Are we working together, or are we competing? Are we collaborating or competing? And I can find no more destructive force inside an organization than to have leaders competing for scarce resources or for credit or for getting their pet project through, or their direction or vision to win, or their managing partner to get elected, or whatever it is. That idea that we would compete instead of collaborate internally. And then also when we say, I just don't feel like I'm collaborating with people in my association the way I used to, or whatever. Well, what's up with that? And so Amy and I thought we'd just kind of look at what is the difference, or what does really good collaboration look like? What has to be present for it? So Amy, I'll let you pick up wherever you want to with this, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I actually had a interesting conversation about this, and I think many inside an organization call each other a team. Like they'll put "Hey team" on emails. But what's interesting is many times when you're looking at a leadership team or a cross-functional team like that, they're actually not working as a team. They're working as individual contributors coming in to report into a meeting with their own objectives and strategies they're trying to push forward, rather than a team might have different players on it, but when they're in the room, they're all working toward one goal and how they can help one another, versus this is what I do in my lane. And so it really is an interesting perspective on the word team and when we talk about collaboration.
Yes.
Because if you think about it in a sports analogy, everybody is a expert in the role that they play, but they're all going toward the same goal or touchdown or whatever they're trying to win for the team, right?
Yep.
But we don't see that in organizations in the same way. Is that everyone's trying to win individually, and they're worried that if they give up something, it's going to make them look bad, or they might lose something financially or whatever it is, versus looking at the greater good. And and this is very broad strokes, so I'm not saying everybody everywhere is like this. However, we see it all of the time, that in the room, that like what is, I think when we talk about team and trust and collaboration, no one is real sure what someone is saying or not saying in a room is truly what they think and feel. And
Mm.
they're strategically saying or not saying certain things based on what they're trying to push forward. So it's very hard to build trust amongst the group and collaborate in order for everyone to go down the same path and be able to know that we each have each other's back.
Yeah. So I hate all of that actually. I mean, I love I don't like that it exists. So the one word or phrase that just kept coming through my mind while you were sharing that was the concept of self-preservation. Like, am I trying to preserve um, my stakes, my looking good, my allocation, my whatever, right? My me getting credit, me, my. And I was thinking about like what makes functional collaboration, and certainly, we couldn't take our government today and say, oh, here's an example, let's study it. Um, eh, we're not working toward anything common. It's like, and inside organizations, if we don't have a common shared vision, we don't have agreement on where we're going together, then it is really hard not to play a fragmented game and just try to think, I've got to bring my thing forward. I'll just bring my thing forward because I don't know what we're doing as a group. And so I think, one of the big differences between truly collaborative environments and more competitive environments is collaborative environments are working together toward something, and they've discussed that something, and they reassess that something, like, where are we going, the destination of our vision, our shared vision together. They reassess. They don't just say blindly, we said this one time and now that's our vision. They regularly update that. They have vulnerable conversations. They tell their truth. They talk about reservations they have with the shared vision and the plans, but they're going somewhere together. They're like on a road trip in a car, and they all decided where that trip is going, and they got in the car willingly, and they're going to make it fun. Or competitive environments, we're not really trying to talk about where we're going together because we don't think we could get agreement. So we're just like a bunch of, shared players that plan to go out on the portal, if you're going to use the team analogy. And I don't so much care about the end destination of this thing we're working toward together, as much as me highlighting how awesome I am or having success in my department or my service line or my clients or whatever it is. I'm working on my individual contributor stats and not my unified team progress. And so I think it kind of comes down to that. Like, do we have a shared vision here? And I think for a lot of firms in this country today, that's a question that they're not asking. And they're not asking it because there's a lot of options that weren't on the table 5 years ago. A lot of sort of murky choices that they're afraid to engage with their peers on because they don't know what their peers are going to want to do or think. And
Mhm.
they're scared of the outcome. But meanwhile, it creates this kind of fragmented, almost inauthentic team, where we're not all rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, and giving to each other, right? Like, so if we see an area that is faltering or a person that is faltering on the team, you know, that is how we build trust on a team, is that we're reaching out to see how we can help, right? But if instead we're all talking about the person that they're failing and flailing, um, and waiting, for that, we're not acting as a team and we're not acting as one unified front. And this really goes down,
Mm,
into the staff levels, because like we can think those things are private in a room and protected conversation, but somehow those conversations get out where staff doesn't necessarily feel like how their jobs line up and how it lines up with the rest of the organization, or even, I mean, you can see it in little things, just as like someone in tax might have an interest in audit, but we don't let the person go, right? Like we don't, that isn't okay to leave. That's actually like turning your back on the person that you're working for, instead of what is the greater good for the company and that person. And so in order to build trust and people to feel like they can be transparent and vulnerable of the things that they want and need, and even if it is uh, everybody has different goals based on where they're at in the organization, that if we're not open about it and working together on it, then it is a combative situation where no one trusts each other, right? And so it is very different generationally based on if I'm about to retire versus if I'm earlier in my career and I've got, runway on my career, what I want for my career or what I want for my retirement. And those conversations have to be vulnerable and transparent so that you can build trust and come to a common ground on it, so it doesn't feel like the rug's being pulled out from under you, or there's people having conversations in private rooms that are of the same mind and strategizing of how to keep one way or the other. And I think people are too afraid to have the hard conversations, but that is what builds trust, is when we always are going to feel closer by communicating and by being transparent and vulnerable, finding a way that we can do it that isn't going to throw a grenade in the room or be forceful or put down someone for their feelings or ideas. So that's got to be facilitated. But in order for anyone to trust each other, they have to know what your motivations are.
Big time. Yeah. Palms up, vulnerable honesty, self-honesty first, and then honesty in the room. Right. And you're right. I have to pick the room. I can't just blow up a meeting that doesn't have the right people in it. But if we're partners together and we're trying to figure out how to run this organization better or what direction we want to take it going forward, and I know a lot of partner groups are having that conversation, manipulating in the back room and having hallway conversation and then not being straight, not being vulnerable about what you want and not who you represent, what you feel and want, like that real self-honesty, but then expression of honest motivations, selfish interest. This is what I want to see happen. This is what I'm dreaming about. This is what I envision for our organization or for my team or for my clients or for my firm or whatever it is. Building an environment where people could say that and know that they won't get, made wrong for it. They won't get laughed out of the room. It doesn't mean we're going to do what everybody expresses they'd like to see happen, but it does mean that we'll at least really hear what people want. Instead of right now, there is a decent amount of inauthentic, almost like, let's not even go there because that'll just disrupt us from getting the day-to-day done. Let's just keep our heads down and keep working, and we'll figure out the future later. And all that does is create this strange kind of frictiony, factional way of running. And I know that Amy and I are seeing a lot of that. And it's unfortunate. And it doesn't take that much. Yes, it has to be facilitated. It might require an outside facilitator, could be successfully facilitated internally, but you just have to start somewhere and start having the conversations. And sometimes, by the way, one of the ways we try to help organizations get it out is by surveying, surveying and asking the right kind of hard questions in the survey. And then you can have an outsider gather the data so nobody feels like they're outed, but also just doing it internally and letting everybody read each other's comments is the most healthy way to just see where does everybody stand on these things. Instead of going in a room where some people won't speak, they're naturally going to be quieter and be more of a listener, and they won't really express. But if you get them to write their answers, you might get more. So I like that as a strategy too.
Yeah. And I think this can happen in so many ways. So this can happen, with big decisions about what direction you go with your organization. But I see it happen a lot with technology.
Yes.
And the conversation in the room is, this is what the agreement is in the organization of how we're going to push for digital transformation or AI or whatever that the initiatives are. But then what happens in the real world is those people that are tasked with automating or doing that transformation gets pushed back from the same people that had been in the room and either didn't speak up because they just knew, well, I'm not going to work as a team. I'm just going to work as an individual contributor, and I've got power over my area. So I'm going to, just disregard this, even though I'm shaking my head in this room. And that is the breakdown of trust, because it's a waste of company money and resources when we cannot communicate and have a real conversation about these things and not avoid it and not hide from it. It's when it's coming up and you're hearing that this is the initiative that is going to be pushed forward, that is the time to speak up as a team member and say, this time period is not good for this, and this reason. This is when we'd be open to it. This is when there would be a resource available for it. Having agreed upon, measures of how this would go forward. So I think what becomes frustrating is the amount of time that gets wasted in an organization because of pushback, because of backroom conversations, or just not moving forward with what's agreed upon. And then the person who is in charge of the organization doesn't trust their team because they're like, I go in there every time, put this on the table, everyone nods yes. And then, once this goes into operations, everyone's pushing back individually. So where's the gap?
Yes. And maybe it's not paying attention when I was saying the first yes, and that's not an excuse. But mostly it's because I don't want to make waves right there, but I'll make you wrong for it later, or something.
The company.
Yeah, or I won't implement, or I won't, I'll be the laggard because I wasn't really committed. I agree. I see that a lot where it's that old saying that on a plate of breakfast, the chicken was supportive, but the pig was committed. For the bacon or the ham, and that idea of like, am I being supportive or am I being committed? And in order to be committed, you have to ask hard questions. You have to really navigate, what am I promising here? And I do think sometimes we don't really view what we're doing as promising. Like it's like you're polling me, like an exit poll on the street. Sure, I think that's a good idea. I answer in a way that isn't thoughtful and isn't really a promise of my support, a promise of my inconvenience self later, my promise to do something hard that you're going to need me to do. And I do think that's part of collaboration too, is the real clear commitment of whatever in order to pull together and do something together. Most really incredible transformational things that we do as leaders are hard. They're not easy, and they're not without awkward conversations and sometimes difficult decisions and sometimes some kind of loss in the process. We have to often give something up in order to get something new. That's very common. And so sometimes that's money, sometimes it's times, but sometimes it's other things, shedding clients or losing a certain amount of information that we used to have because the new system won't have that at our fingertips or whatever it is. There's always loss. And just being a little bit more straight about all of that and then realizing how important it is. I had a managing partner of a firm tell me yesterday that one of the things he's been saying to his firm leadership team is, we do hard things. And that's a runner's, a common runner's theme or mantra. I do hard things, or we do hard things, when you're trying to train for something really difficult. And I thought that was such a smart line to be using.
Yeah. And I would just like to, I had an example that popped into my head. And I think this is where we get away from core values. So when we create core values in an organization, it is a way for us to communicate through those core values and be able to come to agreement. And I remember when I had my accounting practice, there was a big franchise we were working with, and we were sitting in a meeting with their leadership team, making some hard decisions about how an implementation was going to go. And they came to a decision in the room, but then their next question was, now, does this meet our core values, this decision? And they pressure tested it, and everyone decided if it did. And I think it's a way to level up outside the individual.
Yes.
So that you're still leveling up to the core values of an organization and how you make decisions and how you collaborate and work together, and making sure you're doing right for the people that are working for you and your customers and everything else. So it's just something I wanted to wrap with, because I think it's a way to get out of the me versus you and level up to why we exist.
I love that. And what we're committed to,
Mm-hmm.
behaviorally and in the way that we, transform together. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and using them as a filter all the time, beacon of light in tough decisions. That's what we commonly say. So you can't have a huge list of core values to do that. You
Right.
can't have
You
a fake list. It can't be a good list. You can't copy it from someone else. It has to. I was thinking about one of our core values, which is authenticity, and how crucial it is sometimes for us as a filter for us when we're deciding about taking a position or something like that. It's very helpful for us to hold that one up and say, what's the authentic thing to do here? What's true to us, true to self. So anyway, love it, Amy. And I always love processing the challenges that we face as leaders with you. So thank you for that. And thanks for all of the people who tuned in. We had a good, solid live audience with us today. And we would love any thoughts you have on this subject, but any other leadership issues you want us to process. I don't know if we're on next week. I didn't look. Caroline says, yes, we are on next week. So we will see you all next Friday at 12 Eastern. And until then, stay in touch in social media or otherwise. Take care, everybody.